Big John, fantastic to speak to you once again, reflecting on the year that was in the UFC. I suppose there's a rivalry and a tension sometimes between Bellator and UFC, but how much kudos, how much respect do we have to give them for their logistical flexibility and getting up and running so quickly after the pandemic?
Oh, they, you take a look at what occurred and the way they ended up when they first did their show in Florida. I think it was July, I want to say 11th. But from that point, man, they were a machine. They were just putting one show after the other out. And the real thing that you have to be impressed with is as impressed as you should be with what the UFC did as a promotion. It's what the fighters did in that cage and the performances that they put on. That was really impressive.
Yeah, well, fantastic. It's been a great year, I suppose, in terms of the casual fan base or the general sporting base. One thing that they'll probably remember is Joaquin Buckley's kick against Impa Kasanganay that sort of resounded around the world the next day, didn't it? What are your thoughts on that as someone's been watching MMA for a while? Where does that stand in the all-time knockout list?
Yeah, that one's up there. You got to look and say, when a fighter like Joaquin Buckley does something that most people have never seen happen before,
Mm.
that's a moment. And just the way that he threw that kick, the way that he set it up by balancing himself, turning his foot so he could swing his entire body around. And Impa, great guy, great fighter. He just never saw it coming. And we always say, the things that you don't see are the ones that hurt you. And it definitely hurt him because it made him stiff. And luckily he was okay after it. But that was just one of those moments that's going to live on as a highlight reel. Unfortunately, for Impa, it's not a good one for him, but for Joaquin, that one is going to stick with him forever.
Is that drilling when he catches his one leg is caught in the front kick and then he reacts that way? Is that something you drill in the gym, or is that just pure creativity?
No, it's both. It is absolutely being creative, but you have to drill those things and know that I can do this because I've done it, hundreds or thousands of times against, a position on a bag where I just go back and throw that kick and throw it again and throw it again. So when you get that opportunity, it just tends to happen. Your body just responds. And that's what Joaquin Buckley did.
The next memory takes us to Dustin Poirier against Dan Hooker. Poirier, of course, with a big start to 2021 ahead against Conor McGregor. But how do you reflect on this fight against Hooker? Was it the fight of 2020?
Yeah, I mean, it was unbelievable. The second round of that fight was probably one of the best rounds you'll ever see in MMA. And it was that back and forth where Dan Hooker was really doing well in the beginning of that fight. And then Dustin Poirier just kind of took over. And it was that the will of Dan Hooker to stay in a fight there where he was receiving a ton of damage at a certain point, but having no give, no quit at all. That, to me, is the fight of the year. That fight was just unbelievable. The output of both guys and what both guys took to actually get to the end of that fight. And the fact that they both made it that 5 rounds, that 25 minutes with what they did was just fabulous.
How do you see Poirier's rematch with Conor McGregor? Do you feel he's learned? Has he evolved? Is he a better challenge for Conor than he was 7 years ago?
I think the biggest thing that I see out of Dustin is absolutely a better fighter today, especially at 155 than he was at 145. I always thought that he was cutting too much weight, and I did think it affected his ability to, take shots as much or to actually have that same energy throughout the fight. But I think the biggest change is going to be he's matured as a fighter, and in the first fight, Conor was able to get into his head. Conor made him mad. Conor made him want to hurt, Conor. And when you fight mad, you don't fight smart. And so I think that Dustin has absolutely improved in knowing, hey, don't get mad. I'll get my shots in there. I'll do my thing. And when I fight smart, I'm one of the best fighters in the world. So it's going to be a great matchup.
Yeah, cannot wait for that one to get us started in 2021. UFC 248, our next stop, China versus Poland. Weili Zhang against Joanna Jedrzejczyk of Poland. Tell us why this one stands out for you.
That's not easy to say either one of those,
No,
is it?
my Mandarin and my Polish are a bit rusty
That's awesome.
after this year.
that's another fight of the year, candidate. But that was before the pandemic, so a lot of people aren't even remembering that was part of 2020. But
Mm,
it was at the beginning, and that was on the night that wasn't even the main event. The main event was Yoel Romero against Israel Adesanya, that turned out to be kind of a snoozer, and
mm,
that fight was just fireworks from the beginning. And what Joanna ended up having, as far as she had a
bad
hematoma on her
injury.
head that started to really swell her head out. Just an incredible fight by both ladies, and it could definitely win. I kind of edged towards Poirier and Hooker, but that one could definitely be fight of the year also.
Fantastic. Well, let's take you next to Chan Sung Jung, the Korean zombie. Hopefully those pronunciations were okay as well, against Brian Ortega, which is a bit more comfortable. This goes in your list as the best overall performance of the year. Is that where you'd rate it for Brian Ortega?
Yeah, I rate that as one of the best performances of the year based on a multitude of things. And one is that Brian Ortega was out of fighting for well over a year, almost 2 years, and
Mm,
came back with that performance against somebody as good as the Korean zombie. And we all know exactly what he can do. The fight before he fought Ortega was against Frankie Edgar, and he put Frankie Edgar away in the first round. And Frankie Edgar is one of the best MMA fighters of all time.
mm.
So the performance that Brian Ortega had that night, like, he won, I think, every round of that fight, and just handily, put on a stand-up performance, because everyone knows Brian Ortega as an incredible jiu-jitsu stylist, a submission expert, a guy that, that's why we call him T-City for, the triangle. Man, his stand-up is looking so good. It was just an incredible performance that night.
How do you see T-City? I know you know him well, going up against Alexander Volkanovski. How do you see that play out?
I think this is a super tough fight for Alexander, and I really like Volkanovski. He's good everywhere. He's fun to watch. But, you take a look at his fights against Max Holloway, and this is where, MMA math does not compute. It just doesn't work, because Max Holloway had a great showing against Brian Ortega, and
Mm,
really put Brian away. The only loss that Brian Ortega's had on his career. But you take a look at this one, Volkanovski lives off of being the guy that sometimes uses his wrestling to put the fight in a position where he can do some damage, but he uses it to help his stand-up, because it's that threat. I don't know if he wants to threaten putting Brian Ortega on his back. Brian Ortega is that good off of his back. A lot of guys are good with jiu-jitsu when they're in the top position. Brian Ortega is dynamic off of his back, so you got to be very careful about putting him there. But then you've got to deal with the stand-up game that he showed against the Korean zombie. This is going to be a very tight fight between these two.
yeah, fascinating stuff. We'll look forward to that one as well. An interesting one that may be controversial. I understand from the podcast that your colleague, verbal sparring partner Josh Thompson, wasn't overly enamored with Jack Hermanson versus Marvin Vittori, the Italian. But what kind of stuck in your mind about this? What did you appreciate about this?
I'll tell you what, I thought it was a great fight. And I thought that Jack Hermanson is, he's really good on the ground. And so a lot of people were looking at Marvin and saying, well, he can't go to the ground with him. And he, hurt Hermanson in the first round. He put him down with a big shot and then went after him. Hermanson had his ability to try to do things, couldn't get it done, and lost that first round, and lost it, I would have said 10-8, because he was close to being put out by that shot. And then second round, Vittori again wins the round, but it's closer. And then in the third round, Hermanson really turns it around, and he's got Vittori in trouble throughout that round. And you take a look at just the dynamics of what occurred for both fighters throughout that fight. I thought it was just interesting, because you could see when each guy was trying to gain control. He was trying to gain control of the distance, or trying to gain control of the pace of the fight, or just trying to set a trap and get his opponent to move into that trap, and then he wouldn't do it, so he tried to set another one. There was just so many things going on that were so interesting. I loved the fight. I thought both guys performed incredibly. It was just fun the entire time. I was standing up from the fourth round on. I was standing up in front of my TV, kind of moving, doing things, just enjoying the entire thing.
Yeah, Johnson, wonderful fights and wonderful fighters. Who would be, though, your MVP for the year? People will maybe think about Habib. Habib, we're retiring undefeated after victory over Justin Gaethje. But where do you look? Is it about activity as much as it is about the singular performances?
I think it is about activity. I think it's about activity and the outcome of what's occurred. And that's why I give it to Kevin Holland. I think he has had an incredible year. He's fought 5 times. And I think that started in July, I believe. And all the way through, taking a look at 5 fights in 7 months of time with 5 victories, 4 of those being stoppages. Kevin Holland has just had the 2020 of anybody's life. He's got it against guys, like the Joaquin Buckley that we talked about with the big knockout. He knocked out Joaquin Buckley. Yeah. He has just had an incredible year, and I think he deserves to, get that MVP title as far as with how much he's fought, who he's fought, and the outcomes. You got to give it to him.
What should an MMA fighter look at in terms of a busy schedule, a realistic schedule for a number of fights in a year?
I think a realistic schedule for most guys is going to be somewhere around 3 fights. That's a lot because you're talking about camps and, getting yourself in shape and the weight cuts and things like that. So if you're fighting 3 times in the year, you're doing well. If you're fighting less than that, it might be that, it's, injuries or things like that, or age is coming in a little bit. But you should be trying to always be improving. And I think that 3 fights keeps you busy. It keeps you motivated and keeps you in line without taking too much time off and letting things start to fall down a little bit.
Yeah, and often you have to adjust those plans quickly, don't you, when you get late offers of fights and things like that. So it's not always as easy to plan ahead. In terms of planning ahead for us, though, who should we look out for in 2021 in the UFC, John?
Well, I think there's a couple guys. Everyone's going to look towards, I say Kevin Holland is the guy you're going to have to look forward to because he's even mouthing off to Israel Adesanya and them, but Kazmat Chimaev is the guy that he jumped on the scene. He had some great performances. His fight against Leon got canceled based upon the COVID situation and stuff, but that's a guy that everyone's going to be interested in. I think everyone should be looking towards. What is that guy going to do in 2021? Is he going to continue on? And if he does, is it going to be at 170 or 185? He's that guy that can go anywhere, so it's going to be fun to watch him.
Got Michael Chandler on the list as well, recruit from Bellator. How do you see him fitting into that plot? Because it's a fascinating one, isn't it, kicking off with the McGregor-Poirier rematch?
Yeah, I think that Michael Chandler is a guy to watch in the UFC this year because it's a real question of who do they put him against first? They brought him in, and right away he was the alternate in case either Khabib or Justin Gaethje, came down with something or got hurt before their fight. That didn't happen, but he had to do the weight cut. He had to do everything. And there was a couple times, with matchups that I looked at and that I thought he would fit in well with. It's going to be interesting to see who they put him against. You got guys that I could look at that are up there now that if I was them and I had the ranking that I had, I don't want to fight Michael Chandler because most people that are watching the UFC don't realize how good he is. And he's going to give certain guys a lot of trouble. I think, everything's about the matchup. What are they going to do? But Michael Chandler could do big things in 2021 in the UFC.
Big John, been an absolute pleasure. Merry Christmas to you and Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas to you, Ed. Have a great Christmas, a great New Year, and always thank you for talking with me.